The metal deck plates creaked under Captain James Walker's boots as he walked through the empty corridors of the U.S. Defiant. The sound echoed off the walls, reminding him of just how few crew members remained on board. A ship designed for a crew of 300 now ran with barely 50 people. The skeleton crew kept the basics running, but that was about it. Walker stopped at a viewport and looked at his ship's reflection in the reinforced glass. The Defiant's hull showed its age. 30 years of service had left their mark. Paint peeled off in patches, revealing the gray metal underneath. Some called it ugly. His own crew had nicknamed it Old Rust. But Walker saw something different when he looked at his ship. He saw a fighter that had survived dozens of battles and still stood ready for more. The captain's tablet buzzed. Another message from command, probably asking about the decommissioning schedule. They wanted the Defiant stripped and scrapped within the month. Walker ignored it and kept walking. He had more important things to do than read about how his ship was worthless. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Lisa Martinez worked on an open panel, tools scattered around her feet. She didn't stop working when Walker entered, but she did shake her head. "They're really going to scrap her, aren't they, Captain?" "Not if I can help it," Walker said, picking up a wrench and handing it to her. "What's broken this time?" "Nothing's broken. I'm making improvements." Martinez wiped grease from her hands and grinned. "The brass thinks this ship is outdated. I'll show them outdated. Did you know our old reactor can push out 40% more power than the new models? The safety limits were set way too low back then." Walker raised an eyebrow. "Is that safe?" "Safer than those new reactors. They pack too much into too small a space. One hit in the wrong place and boom." Martinez patted the Defiant's reactor housing. "This old girl, she's built like a bunker. Sure, the power output is lower on paper, but she can take a beating and keep running." Their conversation was interrupted by the ship's comm system. "Captain to the bridge," the voice said. "Priority message from command." Walker sighed. "Keep up the good work, Chief. Don't let anyone tell you this ship is finished." The bridge felt too empty with just 3 people manning it. Walker remembered when every station had 2 crew members, with others standing ready as backups. Now most stations stayed dark. His tablet buzzed again as he sat in the captain's chair. This time, he opened the message. The orders were clear. Due to budget cuts, the Defiant's decommissioning had been moved up. They wanted the ship back in port by the end of the week. Walker's hands tightened on the tablet's edges. "Sir," his communications officer asked, "everything okay?" "They're pushing up the schedule," Walker said. "Want us back in port immediately." The young officer looked around the bridge, at all the worn but working stations. "But what about our patrol route? This sector will be unprotected. Command says they'll send a new ship to cover it." Walker stood up and walked to the main viewport. "Eventually. Could be weeks before they get around to it." He stared at the stars, thinking about the 3 colony worlds that depended on the Defiant's presence. Small colonies, sure. Nothing critical to the war effort. But there were families out there. Children. They slept better knowing the Union warship washed over them. Walker made his decision. He turned to his crew. "Send a message back to command. Tell them we're having engine trouble. Nothing serious, but we need to run at reduced speed. Should take us." He did some quick math. At least 2 weeks to reach port. His bridge crew tried to hide their smiles. They knew there was nothing wrong with the engines. Martinez had them running better than ever. But if command wanted to write off the Defiant as a broken-down relic, Walker would use that to his advantage. "Sir," his sensor operator called out. "Long-range scans picking up something strange. Might be sensor ghosts, but..." Walker walked to the sensor station. The officer pointed to several faint signals at the edge of their range. They flickered in and out, like ships trying to hide their presence. "How many contacts?" "Hard to tell with these old sensors, sir. Between 30 and 40, I think." Walker nodded slowly. The Defiant sensors were old, but they were also simple. Modern stealth systems were designed to fool more advanced scanners. Sometimes older technology had unexpected advantages. Keep monitoring them, Walker ordered. But don't adjust the sensors. Let them think we haven't spotted them yet. He returned to his chair and opened a comm channel to engineering. Chief Martinez, remember how you said this ship could give more than they thought? We might need to test that soon. About time, Martins replied. I've got some surprises ready. Just say when. Walker looked at the sensor display again. The mysterious ships were still there, still trying to hide. He thought about the colonies, about how many lives depended on the Defiant doing its job. Command might have written off this ship, but Walker knew better. The Defiant had 30 years of battle experience built into its bones. Every scar, every patch, every repair told a story of survival. Send another message to Command, he told his communications officer. Tell them our engines are going to need even more work than we thought. We'll have to extend our patrol while we fix them. As his crew relayed the message, Walker smiled. Let everyone think the Defiant was broken down and helpless. Let them underestimate this old warship. Sometimes the strongest weapons were the ones your enemy never saw coming. In engineering, Martinez and her team worked through the night, pushing the ship systems well beyond their official limits. They knew what was coming. The whole crew did. They'd all chosen to stay when others transferred off, seeing the same thing Walker saw in the Defiant. Not a relic, but a warrior that refused to quit. The mysterious ships moved closer, still thinking themselves undetected. But the Defiant's crew saw them. The old ship systems might not be modern, but they worked just fine. Walker ordered the crew to battle stations quietly, not wanting to alert their watchers. Ready to show them what a broken-down old ship can do. He asked his bridge crew. They responded with determined nods. The Defiant might have been written off by Command, but her crew knew better. Sometimes the best ships weren't the newest or the most advanced. Sometimes they were the ones that had earned their strength through years of service, through battle scars and hard-won experience. The unknown ships crept closer, and Walker let them come. The Defiant waited, playing the part of the helpless old warship while her crew prepared for what would become one of the greatest battles in Union history. They had no way of knowing it yet, but the ship that everyone had written off was about to remind the galaxy why humanity's older warships were still worth fearing. In his captain's chair, Walker watched the sensor readings and smiled. Let them come. The Defiant might be old, but she wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. And soon, very soon, she would prove it to everyone. The first real warning came 3 hours before dawn. Ship time. The Defiant's sensors picked up energy spikes from the approaching ships. They were powering up their weapons. Walker stood at his command station, watching the tactical display as more details became clear. The mysterious ships had stopped trying to hide. 35 ships, the sensor officer reported, his voice steady despite the news. Dominion warships, Captain. Looks like they didn't expect anyone to spot them so soon. Walker nodded. The Dominion, humanity's newest enemies, had a reputation for attacking what they thought were easy targets. They probably saw the Defiant as exactly that. An old, broken-down ship they could destroy without much effort. Send a message to Command, Walker ordered. But run it through our old encryption systems, not the new ones. He knew the Dominion had broken several of the Union's modern codes. Sometimes older was better. The response from Command came quickly. All ships were to retreat immediately. The Dominion fleet was too powerful. But Walker looked at his tactical display, at the 3 colony worlds that would be defenseless if the Defiant left. 30,000 civilians lived on those worlds. Farmers, miners, families with children. The Dominion wouldn't show them any mercy. Chief Martinez, Walker called over the ship's comm. How are those engine modifications coming along? Better than anyone would expect, Captain, Martins answered. Her voice carried the excitement of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. I've got the reactor running at 110% capacity. Weapons are hot. Shield generators are putting out more power than they did when this ship was new. Walker smiled. While everyone else saw an outdated warship, Martinez had seen potential. She'd spent months improving every system, finding ways to push them far beyond their original limits. The Defiant might be old, but she was far from helpless. All hands, battle stations, Walker ordered. The few crew members they had moved quickly to their posts. They'd drilled for this, prepared for this. They knew what was coming. The Dominion fleet spread out in a classic attack formation. Their ships were beautiful things, all smooth lines and gleaming metal. Next to them, the Defiant looked like exactly what everyone thought it was, an aging warship that should have been scrapped years ago. "They're broadcasting, sir," the communications officer reported. "They're ordering us to surrender or be destroyed." "Send them static," Walker said. "Let them think our communications are failing. Every seeming weakness could become an advantage if used properly." The first Dominion shots came as a test, energy beams reaching out across space. They hit the Defiant's shields that should have collapsed under such modern weapons. But Martinez had modified the old shield generators, and the Defiant shrugged off the attack. Shields holding at 95%, Martinez reported from engineering. "Their fancy new weapons aren't calibrated for our old-style shields. They're expecting modern defenses." Walker watched as the Dominion fleet moved closer, probably confused by the Defiant's survival. That's when he saw their mistake. They were spreading out too much, trying to surround one seemingly harmless old ship. Pride would be their downfall. "Helm, set course 030, Walker ordered. "Make it look like we're trying to run. Let's see how many of them take the bait." The Defiant turned slowly, like a wounded animal trying to escape. Several Dominion ships broke formation to chase them, exactly as Walker had hoped. He waited until they were committed to the pursuit before springing his trap. "All weapons, fire." The Defiant's old weapons might not have been as sophisticated as modern ones, but they had other advantages. They were simple, reliable, and thanks to Martinez's modifications, incredibly powerful. The first volley caught 3 Dominion ships completely by surprise. Their modern shields, designed to stop modern weapons, struggled against the Defiant's upgraded but old-style weapons. 2 enemy ships exploded immediately. The third spun out of control, its shields overwhelmed. The remaining Dominion ships scrambled to regroup, but the damage was done. Their perfect formation was broken. "They're trying to jam our targeting systems," the weapons officer reported with a grin. "But our old targeting computers don't use the frequencies they're jamming. We've got clear shots while they're flying blind." That was another advantage of being underestimated. The Dominion's electronic warfare was useless against the Defiant's outdated systems. While their ships struggled to target the old cruiser, Walker's crew had perfect firing solutions. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recent naval history. The Defiant moved like a dancer among the stars, its experienced crew using every trick learned over 30 years of service. When the Dominion ships tried to trap them with modern tactics, Walker countered with maneuvers so old they'd been forgotten by most captains. Port shields failing. Martinez called out after a particularly heavy hit. "Rerouting power now." "Helm, roll starboard," Walker ordered. "Show them our stronger shields while the port side recovers." The Defiant spun gracefully, turning its weakness away from the enemy. The move would have been dangerous in a modern ship, but the Defiant's sturdy frame could handle it. The Dominion fleet's formation had completely collapsed now. Instead of working together, their ships fought as individuals, each trying to be the one to kill the troublesome human vessel. Their pride made them predictable. "Target the lead ship," Walker commanded. "Full power to forward weapons." The Defiant's main guns spoke again, their energy beams cutting through space. The Dominion flagship's shields flickered and died. A second volley tore through its hull, turning the beautiful ship into expanding debris. "Enemy fleet is pulling back," the sensor officer reported. "They're trying to regroup." Walker watched as the Dominion ships retreated, clearly shocked by the loss of their flagship. They had expected an easy victory over a single outdated cruiser. Instead, they'd found themselves facing a warrior that refused to die. "Don't let them regroup," Walker ordered. "Push the attack. Show them what this old ship can really do." The Defiant surged forward, its engines burning far brighter than they should have been able to. Martinez had worked miracles with the old power systems, giving the ship speed and power that no one would have thought possible. The Dominion fleet scattered. Their coordination was gone, replaced by panic. Some ships tried to stand and fight, while others turned to run. The Defiant hunted them all, its weapons finding targets with deadly accuracy. In his command chair, Walker felt a fierce pride. His ship, the one everyone had written off as worthless, was proving itself against impossible odds. The crew worked their stations with perfect efficiency, every person exactly where they needed to be. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're picking up transmissions from the colonies. They can see the battle from the ground. They're cheering for us." Walker smiled. This was why they'd stayed. This was why they'd refused to give up on this old ship. Because sometimes the only thing standing between innocent people and disaster was a crew willing to fight impossible odds. The battle wasn't over, far from it. But the Defiant had proven something important. Age didn't matter as much as experience. Modern technology wasn't always better than tested, reliable systems. And most importantly, you should never, ever underestimate a ship and crew that had nothing left to lose. As the Dominion fleet continued to fall apart under the Defiant's assault, Walker made a silent promise. They would remember this day. They would remember the lesson of underestimating their opponents. And they would remember the name of the ship that everyone else had written off as worthless. Fire bloomed across the Defiant's bow as another Dominion ship exploded. Through the bridge viewport, Walker watched the pieces scatter across space like falling stars. His ship shuddered as enemy weapons found their mark, but the old armor held strong. 7 enemy ships destroyed, but many more remained. "Hull breach on deck 4. Martinez's voice crackled over the comm. "Emergency teams responding." "Captain, I've got an idea, but you're not going to like it." Walker gripped his chair as another blast rocked the ship. "I'm open to suggestions, Chief. Remember how I said the reactor could run at 110%? Well, I can push it to 140. It might melt down, but before it does..." Martinez paused as something exploded in engineering. "Before it does, we'll have enough power to punch through anything." The tactical display showed 28 Dominion ships still in fighting condition. They'd learned from their early mistakes and were now coordinating their attacks better. The Defiant's advantages of surprise and confusion were wearing thin. "Do it," Walker ordered, "but evacuate all non-essential personnel from engineering first." Warning lights flashed across every console as Martinez pushed the reactor beyond its limits. The deck plates vibrated under their feet as power surged through the ship's systems. Temperature warnings blared from multiple sections. "New contact," the sensor officer shouted. "Big one, coming in fast from Sector 7. Walker turned to the tactical display and felt his heart sink. A Dominion dreadnought had arrived, its massive form dwarfing even the other enemy ships. It was the kind of warship that could destroy entire fleets by itself. "All hands, brace for impact." Walker barely got the words out before the dreadnought's main guns fired. The blast caught the Defiant along its port side, sending the ship spinning through space. "Port armor down to 20%, Martinez reported. "That thing's got some serious firepower, Captain, but I've got a surprise for them too." The Defiant's spin hadn't been an accident. As the ship turned, Walker saw what Martinez had done. She'd overloaded the port armor plates just before impact, making them absorb far more damage than they should have been able to. The dreadnought had wasted its best shot. "Helm, bring us in close," Walker ordered. "They won't expect that. Those big ships always want to fight at range." The Defiant's engines roared as the old ship charged straight at the massive dreadnought. The enemy vessel's secondary weapons opened up, filling space with energy beams and missiles. But the Defiant's point defense systems, modified by Martinez's team, swatted the missiles from space while the old shields absorbed the energy weapons. "Their targeting systems are having trouble with our speed," the tactical officer reported. "They're used to targeting bigger ships at long range. We're too close and too small for their main weapons now." Walker smiled. Another advantage of being underestimated. The Dreadnought's crew had never trained to fight small ships at close range. They'd probably thought no captain would be crazy enough to try it. "All weapons, target their sensor arrays," Walker commanded. "Let's blind this beast." The Defiant's guns spoke again, pouring fire into the Dreadnought's sensitive sensor systems. Modern warships depended heavily on advanced sensors. Without them, they were like giants swinging blindly in the dark. Martinez's voice came over the comm again, strained but excited. "Reactors holding at 135%, Captain. We've got more power than this ship's had since it was built. Want to see what these old guns can really do?" "Show me, Chief." The Defiant's main weapons had been modified far beyond their original specifications. When they fired this time, the energy beams were bright enough to leave afterimages in everyone's vision. They struck the Dreadnought's shields head-on, and for a moment nothing seemed to happen. Then the massive ship's shields collapsed completely. The Defiant's second volley cut deep into its hull, targeting critical systems that Martinez had identified. The Dreadnought, pride of the Dominion fleet, began to list to one side. "The other enemy ships are moving to protect the Dreadnought," Tactical reported. "They're forming a defensive screen." Walker watched as the remaining Dominion ships clustered around their wounded flagship. It was the moment he'd been waiting for. When fighting a superior force, the goal wasn't to destroy every ship. It was to make them react exactly how you wanted them to. "Helm, attack pattern Delta," Walker ordered. "Engineering, give us everything you've got. Weapons, target the ships directly in front of us. Don't stop firing until we're through their line." The Defiant's engines burned white-hot as the ship accelerated to maximum speed. The enemy formation looked strong, but Walker had seen something his opponents hadn't. In their rush to protect the Dreadnought, they'd left a weak point in their defense. Multiple impacts. Someone shouted as enemy fire raked the Defiant's hull. Warning sirens blared throughout the ship, but Walker kept his eyes on the tactical display, watching as they drew closer to their target. "Now," he ordered. The Defiant's guns fired everything they had. At the same time, Martinez diverted every scrap of power to the forward shields. The old ship hit the enemy formation like a bullet through paper. 2 Dominion ships exploded as the Defiant's weapons found their marks. A third spun away, its entire side torn open. And then they were through, with the enemy fleet split in 2 behind them. The Dreadnought lay exposed, its defenses stripped away. "Engineering to bridge," Martinez called. "Whatever you're going to do it fast. The reactor can't take much more of this." Walker looked at his tactical display one last time. The remaining Dominion ships were trying to turn around to close the gap the Defiant had torn in their formation. But they were too slow, too clumsy in their panic. "All weapons, fire on the Dreadnought's engines," he ordered. "Don't let them get away." The Defiant's gun spoke one final time. Energy beams sliced through the Dreadnought's wounded hull, finding its massive engine cores. For a moment, the huge ship seemed to shudder. Then its engines exploded, the chain reaction tearing the mighty vessel apart from within. The blast wave hit the Defiant like a hammer, pushing the old ship through space. But decades-old armor and structural supports held together, proving once again that they didn't build ships like this anymore. "Dominion fleet is in full retreat," Tactical reported, wonder in his voice. "They're running, Captain. They're actually running." Walker watched as the surviving enemy ships fled in different directions, all coordination lost. The Dreadnought's destruction had broken their will to fight. No one had expected a single outdated cruiser to achieve something like this. In engineering, Martinez worked frantically to bring the reactor back under control. The Defiant had pushed far beyond its limits, but somehow the old ship had held together. Just like its crew, it had refused to give up when everyone else had written it off. "Stand down from battle stations," Walker ordered. "Begin damage control procedures." He looked out at the debris field that had once been a proud enemy fleet. "And someone get me a secure channel to command. I think we need to update them on our status." The bridge crew laughed, tension finally breaking. They had done the impossible. A single aging cruiser had stood against an entire fleet and emerged victorious. The colonies were safe, and the Dominion had learned a harsh lesson about underestimating their opponents. As damage reports came in and repair crews got to work, Walker felt a deep pride in his ship and crew. The Defiant might have been old, but today it had proven that age and experience could triumph over modern technology. Sometimes the strongest warriors were the ones that everyone else had forgotten about. Smoke filled the Defiant's corridors as damage control teams worked to contain the aftermath of battle. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls, and the ship's hull groaned with every movement. But they were alive. They had won. Walker walked through his wounded ship, checking on his crew and seeing the damage firsthand. Every few steps, someone would stop to salute or shake his hand. Their eyes showed pride mixed with disbelief. They had just destroyed a Dominion dreadnought and scattered an entire enemy fleet. The captain stopped at a viewport, looking out at the field of debris that surrounded them. Pieces of Dominion ships drifted past, their once beautiful hulls now twisted and broken. The sight reminded him of how close they had come to sharing that fate. "Captain to engineering," he called over the ship's comm. The system crackled with static but still worked. Like everything else on the Defiant, it refused to give up. "Engineering here," Martines answered, her voice tired but satisfied. "If you're coming down, watch your step. We've got coolant leaks everywhere, and the reactor's still running hotter than I'd like." Walker made his way down to engineering, passing more repair crews along the way. Every deck showed battle damage, but nothing the old ship couldn't survive. The Defiant had been built to take punishment and keep fighting. Engineering looked like a war zone. Steam hissed from broken pipes, and warning lights flashed on almost every console. Martine stood in the middle of it all, covered in grease and coolant, directing her teams like a conductor leading an orchestra. "How bad is it?" Walker asked, stepping carefully over a fallen support beam. Martinez wiped sweat from her face, leaving a streak of black grease across her forehead. "Bad enough. Good news is, the reactor didn't explode. Bad news is, we burnt out half our power systems pushing it that hard. We're running on backup generators for most systems." She led Walker to the main engineering display, pointing out the damage reports. "Port armor's almost gone. Starboard's not much better. Main guns are offline. We basically melted their power connectors. Life support's working, but environmental controls are shot. That's why it's so hot in here. Can we fix it?" "Already started. This old girl's tough. Everything that broke can be repaired." Martines patted a nearby console affectionately. "Might not be pretty, but we can get her running again. Just need time and materials." The ship's comm system crackled to life. "Bridge to captain. We're receiving multiple transmissions from the colonies. They want to thank us personally. And, sir, you need to see these sensor readings." Walker hurried back to the bridge, leaving Martinez to her repairs. When he arrived, his sensor officer was staring at the display with wide eyes. "What are we looking at?" Walker asked. "The colonies, sir. The Dominion ships we drove off. They were carrying ground troops, enough to occupy all 3 worlds. If we hadn't stopped them." The officer didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what the Dominion did to occupy colonies. The communications officer spoke up next. "Sir, the colonial governors are calling us heroes. They're spreading the word about what happened here. The Defiant's already becoming a legend on the frontier worlds." Walker sat in his command chair, feeling every one of the ship's 30 years in his bones. They had saved 3 worlds today. 30,000 lives protected by a ship that Command had wanted to scrap. "Signal from Command coming in," the communications officer reported. They're sending reinforcements. 3 battle groups should be here in about 6 hours. About time, someone muttered, drawing tired laughs from the bridge crew. The next few hours passed in a blur of damage control and repair work. The Defiant's crew worked tirelessly, patching systems and fixing what they could. They had to be ready in case any Dominion ships came back for revenge. A cheer went up from the sensor station when the first Union ships appeared. Modern battlecruisers and destroyers dropped out of faster-than-light travel, weapons ready, but they found only debris and a battered old cruiser that had somehow achieved the impossible. The commander of the relief force, Admiral Thompson, transported over to the Defiant as soon as he arrived. Walker met him in what was left of the main hangar bay. The Admiral looked around at the battle damage with disbelief. "The report said you destroyed a dreadnought," Thompson said. "I didn't believe it until I saw the wreckage." "How did you do it?" "This ship was supposed to be decommissioned." Walker smiled. "Sometimes the best ships are the ones everyone else has forgotten about, sir. The Dominion didn't expect us to fight. They definitely didn't expect us to win. Their overconfidence was their weakness." Thompson nodded slowly, still looking at the damage around them. "Your chief engineer sent us the reactor readings. By all rights, this ship should have torn itself apart. The power levels you were running, I've never seen anything like it." "The Defiant was built to last," Walker said simply. "They don't make them like this anymore." "No," Thompson agreed. "They certainly don't." He turned to face Walker directly. "I've already sent my report to Fleet Command. The decommissioning order has been canceled. In fact, they want to study what your engineer did with the reactor and weapon systems. This could change how we approach ship design." Walker felt pride swell in his chest. His ship hadn't just won a battle. It had proved that older designs still had value. That experience and determination could overcome superior technology. "There's more," Thompson continued. "The Dominion fleet you scattered. They ran straight into 2 of our patrol groups. Between the damage you did and our patrols, they lost over 80% of their ships. This is the biggest defeat they've suffered since the war began." Word spread quickly through the ship. The crew's pride grew even stronger when they learned the full impact of what they'd achieved. They hadn't just saved 3 colonies. They'd helped strike a major blow against humanity's enemies. In engineering, Martinez received the news while elbow-deep in reactor repairs. She smiled as she worked, already planning improvements to make the old ship even stronger. The Defiant had proven itself in battle, but she knew it could do even more. Walker stood on the bridge, watching as repair ships arrived to help fix the battle damage. The Defiant would need weeks of work to be fully operational again, but it would sail again, stronger than ever. Its days of being forgotten and overlooked were over. "Message from the colonies, sir," the communications officer reported. "They're asking permission to name their new orbital defense stations after the Defiant." Walker nodded, thinking about how much had changed in just one day. His old ship had arrived in this system as a relic, scheduled for destruction. Now it was a symbol of hope and resistance, proof that you should never judge something's worth by its age alone. The Defiant had been written off by everyone except its own crew. But that crew's faith had been rewarded. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, turning their ship's supposed weaknesses into strengths. The legend of the old cruiser that destroyed an Armada was already spreading through Union space, giving hope to other frontier worlds. And somewhere out there, the surviving Dominion ships carried a warning to their fleet. Beware the old ships. Sometimes they bite the hardest. 3 months after the battle, the Defiant floated in space dock, its hull gleaming with fresh paint. The scars of battle had been repaired, but the ship looked different now. Special markings along its side showed its battle honors, and the name Defiant stood out in bold letters that seemed to dare anyone to underestimate the old cruiser again. Walker stood in the observation room, watching as work crews made final adjustments to his ship. The Defiant had been in dock for 12 weeks, receiving not just repairs but improvements. Every system had been checked, tested, and upgraded based on what they'd learned during the battle. Quite a change from when they wanted to scrap her, Martine said, walking up beside him. The chief engineer looked different too. Her uniform now carried the rank of commander, a promotion earned by her incredible work during the battle. "How are the improvements coming along?" Walker asked, noting the excitement in his chief engineer's eyes. "Better than anyone expected. The Union's best engineers have been studying what we did with the reactor and weapons. They said it shouldn't have been possible." Martins grinned. "I showed them exactly how possible it was. Now they're refitting a dozen other older ships with similar modifications." That was perhaps the Defiant's greatest victory. Its success had forced the Union military to reconsider its attitude toward older vessels. Ships that had been scheduled for decommissioning were being evaluated for upgrade programs instead. Experience was being valued alongside technology. The ship's comm system chimed. "Captain, Admiral Thompson requests your presence in the main briefing room. Says it's about our new assignment." Walker and Martinez made their way through the station's corridors. Everywhere they went, people stopped to stare and whisper. The crew of the Defiant had become celebrities after their victory. Everyone wanted to hear the story of how one old ship had destroyed a Dominion dreadnought and scattered an enemy fleet. Admiral Thompson waited for them with a group of senior officers. The briefing room's main screen showed a map of Union space, with particular focus on the frontier regions. "Captain, Commander," Thompson greeted them. "I trust the refit is proceeding well." "Yes, sir," Martins answered. "The Defiant will be ready for space trials by the end of the week. We've increased power output by another 20%, and the new targeting systems are fully integrated with our older weapons." Thompson nodded approvingly. "Good, because we have a special mission for you." He gestured to the map. "The Dominion has changed their tactics since your battle. They're avoiding confrontation with older Union ships, focusing only on targets they're certain they can overwhelm. This has actually given us an advantage." The Admiral touched a control, and several points on the map lit up. "These are sectors we believe the Dominion will target next. Each one is defended by ships they would consider outdated. Ships like the Defiant." Walker understood immediately. "They're traps." "Exactly. The Dominion's overconfidence was their weakness before. Now we're going to use that weakness against them." Thompson smiled. "And the Defiant will lead the operation." The briefing continued as Thompson laid out the details. The Defiant would command a squadron of similarly aged ships, all upgraded with Martinez's innovations. They would patrol the frontier, appearing vulnerable while actually being more than capable of handling any Dominion force they encountered. When the briefing ended, Walker and Martinez walked back through the station. They stopped at a viewport that offered a clear view of their ship. The Defiant's running lights were on, making it look alive and ready for action. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Martins asked. 3 months ago, they wanted to turn her into scrap. Now she's leading a whole squadron." Walker shook his head. "I knew this ship had more to give. I just didn't know how much more." He looked at the special markings on the hull, each one representing a Dominion ship destroyed in the battle. The Dreadnought's mark was largest of all. A group of new crew members passed by, heading toward the Defiant's docking port. The ship's complement had been increased to full strength, with many experienced officers requesting transfer to serve aboard the famous vessel. Everyone wanted to be part of the legend. The ship's comm system activated again. "Engineering teams report all systems are ready for final testing, sir. Permission to begin power-up sequence." Walker shared a look with Martinez. They both knew what this meant. After 3 months of repairs and improvements, the Defiant was ready to fly again. Ready to show the Dominion that their first encounter hadn't been a fluke. "Permission granted," Walker said. "Begin power-up sequence." Through the viewport, they watched as the Defiant's systems came to life. The old ship hummed with power, its upgraded reactor providing more energy than any vessel its size should have been able to generate. Running lights brightened, and weapon ports cycled through their testing sequences. "Message from Fleet Command," the communications officer reported. "The rest of our squadron is assembling. 4 ships, all veterans like the Defiant. They're waiting for us to take command. Walker felt pride swell in his chest. His ship, once considered obsolete, was now leading others into battle. The Defiant had become more than just a single victory. It had become a symbol of everything the Union stood for: determination, innovation, and the refusal to give up even against impossible odds. The final preparations took less than a day. The Defiant's crew worked with practiced efficiency, storing supplies and running final system checks. Everyone knew their jobs, and everyone understood the importance of their mission. As Walker sat in his command chair for the first time since the battle, he looked around the bridge. New displays had been added, but the old reliable systems remained. The perfect blend of experience and innovation, just like the ship itself. All stations report ready, his first officer announced. Squadron is standing by for our signal. Walker nodded, feeling the familiar vibration of the Defiant's engines through the deck plates. Send word to the squadron. Tell them to form up on our position once we clear the dock. The massive space dock doors opened slowly, revealing the star-filled space beyond. The Defiant moved forward under its own power for the first time in 3 months, its engines burning bright and strong. One by one, their squadron fell into formation around them. Each ship was a veteran of countless battles, each one considered outdated by modern standards. But together, under the Defiant's command, they formed one of the most experienced combat units in the Union fleet. Squadron reports ready, communications announced. All ships at your command, sir. Walker looked out at the stars, thinking about how much had changed. The ship that everyone had written off had proven its worth in the hottest fire of battle. Now it would lead others to do the same, protecting the frontier and teaching the Dominion to fear the old ships they had once dismissed. Set course for the frontier, Walker ordered. Let's show them what experience can do. The Defiant led its squadron into faster-than-light travel, heading for the border worlds that needed their protection. They were the ships that everyone else had forgotten about, the ones that had been written off as obsolete. But they had survived while newer, more advanced vessels had fallen. Sometimes the strongest warriors were the ones with the most scars, the ones who had earned their strength through years of service and sacrifice. The Defiant had proven that. Now it would prove it again, leading a squadron of forgotten warriors to protect the worlds that needed them most. The legend of the old cruiser that destroyed an Armada had only begun. The best chapters were still to come. Captain Jack Miller stood at the viewport of the transport ship, his eyes fixed on the dusty orange planet growing larger as they approached. Terminus, they called it. End of the line. The name was fitting in more ways than one. How long till landing? He asked, not turning away from the view. 2 hours, Captain, answered Tom Davis from his station at the communications panel. The young tech specialist's fingers moved quickly over the controls, but his usual enthusiasm was missing. Jack nodded silently. 2 hours until they reached the surface. 2 hours until this 500 soldiers, his responsibility, his family, would begin a mission that wasn't meant to succeed. The orders had come directly from High Command. Secure a landing zone on Terminus, gather intelligence on the alien Vex forces, and prepare for the main invasion fleet. Simple, straightforward, except for all the things that didn't add up. Their equipment was outdated, with rifles that jammed in dusty conditions, the exact environment they were heading into. Their transport ships were old models with failing life support systems. They had been given minimal medical supplies, barely enough food for 2 weeks, and strangely, a complete radio silence order after landing. High Command wanted Terminus. The planet was rich with rare minerals needed for faster-than-light engines, but the Vex who controlled it were known fighters, brutal and efficient. So Command had made a calculation. Why risk valuable troops and equipment when you could send in a sacrificial force first? Jack moved away from the viewport and walked through the main hold where his soldiers prepared for landing. He saw the truth in their eyes. They knew what this was. Not a mission, a suicide run. Sergeant Anna Reed looked up from checking her rifle as Jack approached. Her face was hard, but her eyes showed understanding. "Everyone knows, don't they?" Jack asked quietly. "Yes, sir. Hard to miss when they give us broken equipment and 2 weeks of rations for a 3-month mission." Anna had never been one to sugarcoat things. It's why Jack had made her his second in command. "Gather the officers in the planning room." 10 minutes. As Jack walked away, he felt the weight of command heavier than ever before. High command had betrayed them, but he wouldn't betray his people. He had spent the 3-week journey to Terminus forming a different kind of plan. In the small planning room, Jack faced his 4 top officers. Sergeant Anna Reeves stood with arms crossed, her battle-scarred face serious as always. Tom Davis, barely 25 but the best tech specialist in the division, nervously tapped his fingers on the table. Lisa Jones, their chief medic, sat quietly, her medical bag, too empty of supplies, at her feet, and Mark Wilson, tactical officer with 15 years of experience, studied the planet maps with a frown. "I'll get straight to the point," Jack began. "This mission is designed to fail. We're being sent in blind, under-equipped, and without proper support. Command wants information on Vex defenses, and they're using us to get it." Nobody looked surprised. They had all figured it out already. "Standard procedure would be to follow orders and die trying," Jack continued. "I'm proposing something different." He touched a control, and a holographic map of their landing zone appeared. "Our official orders are to establish a forward base here and begin reconnaissance missions. If we do that, the Vex will wipe us out within days. Command knows this. They're expecting it. They'll collect data on Vex weapon capabilities from our defeat and send the main force in better prepared." Mark Wilson nodded grimly. "Classic sacrificial play. I've seen it before, just never from our own side." "So what are we doing instead, Captain?" Lisa asked, her medical training making her value life above all else. Jack smiled for the first time in weeks. "We're going to disappear." Over the next hour, he outlined his plan. They would make their initial landing as ordered, but instead of establishing the designated base, they would split into small, mobile units. They would abandon their trackers, effectively vanishing from command's monitoring systems. "Won't that be seen as desertion?" Tom asked, worried. "Technically, yes," Jack admitted. "But we're already written off as dead. We're going to use that to our advantage." The plan was risky, but it played to human strengths: adaptability, creativity, and the will to survive against all odds. Each squad would have specific objectives: securing better weapons, finding sustainable food and water sources, learning Vex patrol patterns, and most importantly, gathering actual intelligence rather than just serving as target practice. "One more thing," Jack said as they finished. "I need to be clear. I'm not ordering any of you to do this. This goes against direct commands. Anyone who wants to follow the original orders can do so without judgment." Anna snorted. "With all due respect, sir, command didn't give us much choice. They sent us to die. I'd rather live to spite them." The others nodded in agreement. "Then it's settled," Jack said. "Operation Cockroach begins after landing." "Cockroach, sir?" Tom asked, raising an eyebrow. Jack smiled grimly. "Because we're going to survive when everything says we shouldn't." As the meeting ended, Mark stayed behind. "The troops will follow you, Jack. But what's the end game here? Even if we survive longer than expected, we're still stranded on a hostile planet." Jack nodded. It was the question he'd been asking himself since discovering the truth about their mission. First, we survive. Then we learn about the enemy. And then, he paused, the full weight of what he was planning settling on him. Then we find a way to win on our terms, not commands. 2 hours later, they entered Terminus's atmosphere. The descent was rough, the old transport ships shaking violently as they pushed through thick dust clouds. Warning lights flashed across control panels. Over the comms, Jack could hear the other transports reporting system failures. This was it, the start of their suicide mission. The first shots came as they broke through the cloud cover. Bright energy beams from hidden Vex defense posts struck 3 of their 7 transports immediately. Jack watched through the viewport as the ships carrying nearly 200 of his people erupted into flames and plummeted to the surface. Evasive maneuvers, he ordered, but their pilot was already pulling the ship into a steep dive, trying to avoid the Vex targeting systems. 2 more ships hit. Tom called out from communications, "They're going down, but report survivors." Their own ship rocked as a glancing blow struck one engine. Alarms wailed as the transport began losing altitude too quickly. "Brace for impact," Jack shouted, grabbing onto a support beam. The crash was violent. Jack was thrown against the ceiling, then slammed back to the floor as the ship flipped and skidded across the rocky terrain. Metal tore and sparked around them. Someone was screaming. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the interior in a dull red glow. When the ship finally stopped moving, Jack pushed himself up, ignoring the pain shooting through his shoulder. "Sound off. Who's alive?" Groans and calls came from around the hold. Anna was already on her feet, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead, but otherwise looking functional. Lysa was moving between injured soldiers, her limited medical supplies already being put to use. "Communications are down," Tom reported, coughing through the smoke. "Life support failing. We need to evacuate." Jack nodded. "Get everyone who can move ready to go. Priority on weapons, medical supplies, and water." "Vex patrols will be here soon," Mark warned, checking his rifle. "Their defensive positions are more advanced than our intel suggested." Jack looked around at his surviving crew. They had been sent here to die, used as nothing more than expendable tools by their own leaders. But as he watched them quickly organizing, helping the wounded, preparing to face whatever waited outside, he saw something Command had overlooked. Humans didn't accept death easily, especially when it came as a betrayal. "Remember the plan," Jack said as they prepared to open the damaged hatch. "We're not here to win their war. We're here to survive their betrayal." The hatch creaked open, revealing the harsh landscape of Terminus. The air was breathable but filled with dust that immediately coated their skin and equipment. In the distance, 2 more of their transport ships burned, sending black smoke into the orange sky. Jack took the first step onto the planet's surface. The ground was hard, covered with reddish rocks and sparse, thorny vegetation. The horizon stretched out in jagged hills and deep valleys. Good terrain for hiding, for surviving. 5 minutes until we split into assigned squads, he reminded everyone. "Remove your trackers. As far as Command is concerned, we died in the landing." As the surviving members of the 87th Battalion gathered around him, Jack felt a fierce determination replace his earlier anger. High Command had sent them here as sacrifices, expecting reports of their deaths to filter back as valuable tactical data. Instead, they were about to vanish, and in that disappearance would be the first step toward an unlikely victory that no one, not Command, not the Vex, could possibly foresee. They had been sent to die. But Jack Miller and the 87th Battalion had other plans. 2 weeks after the crash landing, Sergeant Anna Reed crawled on her belly to the top of a rocky ridge. The orange dust of Terminus had turned her once blue uniform into a rust-colored camouflage. She raised her binoculars and scanned the valley below. A Vex patrol moved along the dried riverbed. 6 soldiers in their strange armor that looked like a mix of insect shells and metal plates. They carried energy weapons that could cut a human in half with one shot. Anna counted silently. This was the 3rd patrol to use this route in 2 days. The Vex were creatures of habit, a weakness her team had quickly learned to exploit. She slid back down the ridge to where her squad waited. 5 soldiers who looked as dusty and tired as she did, but their eyes were alert. They had survived when Command expected them all to be dead by now. "Same route, same timing," she told them. "They'll pass the narrow section in 15 minutes. We'll take them there." Nobody questioned her plan. In the 2 weeks since Captain Miller had split the surviving members of the 87th into small squads, they had learned to work with brutal efficiency. Anna's group specialized in one thing: acquiring better weapons. They moved quickly through the rocky terrain, using the paths they had carefully mapped to avoid Vex detection devices. At the ambush point, a narrow section where the patrol would be forced to walk in single file, they set up the trap. It wasn't fancy. They didn't have fancy. What they had were modified grenades using explosive compounds they'd discovered in the soil of Terminus. Tom Davis from Tech Squad had figured that out on day 3. The information had spread through the scattered human forces via their brief, coded radio contacts each night. "Remember," Anna said as they took positions, "we need their weapons intact." The trap worked perfectly. The first explosion made the Vex patrol stop in confusion. The second drove them into cover exactly where Anna wanted them. Her squad attacked from 3 sides, using the few working human rifles they had, aiming carefully for the weak spots in Vex armor they had identified through previous encounters. In less than 2 minutes, all 6 Vex were down. Anna's squad had suffered no casualties. "Strip them of everything useful," she ordered. "We've got 10 minutes before their missed check-in brings reinforcements." The squad moved with practiced speed, taking weapons, communication devices, and the strange power cells the Vex used. These would be delivered to Captain Miller's central camp, hidden deep in a cave system 5 miles away. As they finished, Anna's radio crackled with a coded message: "Base to Hunt lead. Tech needs intact comm unit. Priority." Anna tapped her response: "Hunt lead to base. Coming with gifts. ETA 2 hours." She looked at her squad, feeling a surge of pride. 2 weeks ago, they had been sacrificial lambs. Now they were hunters. "Let's move out. We've got a delivery to make." The hidden base camp had started as a small cave. Now it extended deep into the mountain, with tunnels dug by hand and with repurposed Vex mining tools. Captain Miller had chosen the location carefully, a natural formation of rocks that blocked scanning technology near an underground water source with multiple escape routes. When Anna's squad arrived, Lisa Jones met them at the entrance. The medic looked tired but much more confident than she had on the ship. "How's Green?" Anna asked, referring to one of her soldiers who had been injured 3 days earlier. "Walking again," Lisa said with a small smile. "That Vex medical gel works wonders once you figure out how to use it." She pointed to the communication devices they'd brought. "Tom's been waiting for those. He's in the tech cave." Anna nodded and handed the devices to one of her squad members to deliver. "Where's the captain?" "Strategy room. He'll want your report." The strategy room was just a wider section of cave with a table made from salvaged ship parts. Jack Miller stood over it, studying a map they had created of the surrounding 50 miles. Mark Wilson stood beside him, pointing to various markers they had placed. Jack looked up as Anna entered. His face was thinner than 2 weeks ago, with new lines around his eyes, but he stood straighter. "Successful hunt?" he asked. 6 Vex down, 6 new weapons, plus comm units for Tom, Anna reported. "Their patrols are becoming predictable. They're not adapting to our ambushes." Jack nodded. "That matches what we're seeing everywhere. They follow preset patterns and don't change unless ordered by higher command." "Good news for us," Mark added. "Bad tactical doctrine on their part." "There's something else," Anna said, placing a small device on the table. It looked like a data storage unit with Vex symbols etched into its surface. "Found this on their leader. Tom might be able to get something from it." Jack picked up the device, turning it over in his hands. "Good work. We're starting to piece together their command structure. It's not what command told us at all." "How so?" Anna asked. Jack gestured to the map. "The Vex aren't a unified force. We've identified at least 3 different armor styles, communication frequencies, and patrol areas. They're not working together. If anything, they seem to be watching each other as much as looking for us." This was new information. Anna leaned over the map, seeing the different markers Jack had placed. 3 separate forces. Why would Command miss that? Because they didn't care, Mark said flatly. We weren't sent to gather real intelligence. We were sent to die and reveal Vex weapon capabilities through our deaths. Jack raised a hand to stop Mark's bitter words. What matters is what we do with this information now. Tom has been intercepting their communications. He can't translate everything yet, but he's certain these are 3 distinct factions. So we're not fighting an alien empire, Anna said slowly, understanding the implications. We're walking into a civil war. Exactly. Jack's eyes lit up with the same determination she had seen in the planning room of their ship. And that changes everything. Their conversation was interrupted as Tom Davis rushed into the room, excitement clear on his face despite his exhaustion. Captain, you need to see this, he said, holding up a tablet showing strange symbols that kept changing. I got into their communication network. These aren't just separate factions. They're actively working against each other. And the smallest group, the ones with the blue markings on their armor, they're losing. Jack looked at the information, then back at the map. How confident are you in the translation? Confident enough, Tom said. They use mathematical sequences as the basis of their language. Once I figured that out, the rest started to make sense. Jack was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly racing through possibilities. I think it's time for Phase 2, he finally said. Anna raised an eyebrow. We have a Phase 2. I thought the plan was just to survive as long as possible. The plan, Jack said, a slow smile forming, is to turn their expectation of our death into our greatest weapon. He moved several markers on the map, creating a new pattern. The weakest Vex faction is the one most likely to consider working with us. Common enemies make for strange allies. Anna stared at him. You want to make a deal with the Vex, the aliens we've been killing. I want to contact one faction, yes. The technical specialists with blue markings. Tom says they're losing the Civil War, and they seem less aggressive toward us already. They've never initiated attacks on our squads. The room fell silent as they considered this radical idea. Working with any Vex seemed impossible just 2 weeks ago. But they had learned more about their enemy in 14 days of guerrilla warfare than Command had discovered in years of distant observation. It's risky, Mark finally said, but no riskier than what we're already doing. Anna looked at the map, then at Jack. So instead of just surviving, we're changing the game completely. Jack nodded. Command sent us here to die for their war. I say we live and create our own peace. As his words settled over them, Anna felt something she hadn't expected to find on this mission. Hope. Not just for survival, but for something that might actually matter. They had been sent as sacrifices, but on this dusty orange planet, they were becoming something else entirely. The architects of their own destiny. Captain Jack Miller stood at the edge of the meeting place, a flat expanse of rock surrounded by tall stone formations that blocked most scanning technology. The wind blew dust across his boots as he waited, his hand never far from his weapon, a Vex energy rifle taken from one of their first successful ambushes. This is crazy, Mark whispered beside him. We should have more backup. More humans would make them nervous, Jack replied. This needs to be small, personal. They had spent 3 days setting up this meeting with the blue-marked Vex faction that Tom now called the Modernists. 3 days of careful signals, encoded messages sent through captured communication devices, and nerve-wracking uncertainty. They're coming, Anna said from her position on a higher rock. She had insisted on being part of this meeting, though she remained hidden with a clear shot at the approaching Vex if things went wrong. Jack straightened as 3 figures appeared from behind the rocks on the far side of the clearing. They moved with the strange, fluid grace all Vex possessed. 2 carried weapons, standard for their kind. The one in the middle was different. Smaller, with more intricate blue patterns on its armor, and what looked like tools rather than weapons attached to its belt. That's their leader, Tom said quietly. He stood slightly behind Jack, a translator device of his own making clutched tightly in his hands. The markings indicate a technical or scientific rank. The three Vex stopped 20 paces away. The one in the middle stepped forward, its head tilting in what Jack had learned was a gesture of assessment. "Remember," Tom whispered, "they communicate partly through color shifts in those faceplates. Try to watch for blue. It indicates openness. Red is aggression." Jack nodded and took a deliberate step forward. He placed his weapon slowly on the ground, a gesture they had indicated would begin the meeting. The lead Vex's faceplate shifted from yellow to a pale blue. "A good sign. We are ready to talk," Jack said clearly. Tom activated his translator, and a series of clicks and humming tones emerged. They had tested it extensively on recordings, but this was its first real use. The Vex leader responded with similar sounds, which Tom's device converted to rough human speech. "Why humans seek modernist faction? Others would kill you immediately." Jack had prepared for this question. "We recognize different factions among your people. Your group has not attacked us first. The others have." After Tom translated, the Vex's faceplate rippled with bands of blue and green. Its companions remained yellow, alert but not hostile. "Humans were sent as scouts for invasion," the Vex stated. Not a question, but an assumption. Jack took a calculated risk. "We were sent to die. Our own military sacrificed us to test your defenses. They do not know we still live." Tom hesitated before translating this admission, giving Jack a concerned look. Revealing this weakness was dangerous, but Jack believed it was their best chance at connection. When the Vex heard the translation, all three of their faceplates flickered rapidly through patterns of blue and white. They made sounds that the translator couldn't process. "I think that's surprise," Tom whispered. "Maybe disbelief." The lead Vex stepped closer, its movements more fluid now. "Your own kind sent you as waste material. To die." "Yes," Jack said simply. "We were considered expendable." The Vex leader made a gesture to its companions, who lowered their weapons slightly. Then it addressed Jack directly, its faceplate now solid blue. "We also are expendable to dominant faction. They wish technology only for war. We wish technology for growth." For several seconds, nobody spoke. The wind whistled between the rocks, blowing more orange dust across the meeting ground. Jack felt something shift in the air between them, a recognition of shared experience that transcended their different worlds. "Your people betrayed you," the Vex continued. "Our people wish to destroy us for believing war is inefficient. Perhaps we have common purpose." Jack glanced at Mark, who gave a slight nod. This was going better than they had dared hope. "What is your name?" Jack asked. "I am Captain Jack Miller." The translator struggled with the Vex's response, finally producing, "Concept does not translate fully. Closest meaning, one who builds new paths. You may call me Krav." "Krav," Jack repeated, feeling the strangeness of the word. "We propose an alliance against both our enemies." "Bold proposal," Krav responded, its faceplate rippling with blue and purple. "Why should modernists trust humans?" Jack had anticipated this question too. "Because we both need to survive, and neither of us can do it alone. You are losing your civil war. We are stranded on your planet. Together, we might both live." Krav was silent for a long moment, its faceplate shifting through patterns too complex for Jack to interpret. Finally, it spoke again. "Terms of alliance. We share intelligence. We coordinate our actions against common enemies. We do not attack each other's people. We find a way to communicate with my world that bypasses our corrupt leadership." Tom struggled to translate all this, but Krav seemed to understand the essence. It made a gesture that looked almost human, a tilting of its head and a spreading of its three-fingered hands. "Acceptable beginning," it said. "But problem approaches. Your leaders send new ships. Many. To find why you do not report deaths as expected." Jack felt his heart rate increase. How do you know this? We monitor all orbital signals. Fleet approaches. 7 cycles until arrival. Tom looked at Jack with wide eyes. 7 cycles is about 2 weeks in our time. Mark cursed under his breath. Command is sending a cleanup crew. They noticed we're still alive. Jack's mind raced through possibilities. A human fleet arriving would complicate everything. They would expect to find the 87th Battalion either dead or following original orders. Instead, they would find survivors working with one Vex faction against others. It would look like treason. But it also created an opportunity. Krav, Jack said carefully, the fleet coming is not our ally. They expect us dead. They will attack us as well as you if they discover the truth. Krav's faceplate flashed with rapid patterns. Then we share enemies in space and on ground. Dominant Vex faction prepares large attack on our main facility in 6 cycles. We're caught between 2 forces that want us dead, Mark muttered. But Jack was already seeing a different picture. He looked at Krav with new intensity. Or we have 2 enemies who don't know about each other. 2 forces that we can prepare for because we know they're coming. Krav's faceplate settled into a steady blue glow. You suggest strategy of misdirection. Make enemies face each other instead of us. Jack nodded slowly. Exactly. We feed your dominant faction information about the human fleet. We send misinformation to our command about Vex positions. Set a trap. Anna called down from her hidden position, unable to contain herself any longer. Krav looked up at her voice but did not seem alarmed by the discovery of another human. Its faceplate shifted to a pattern of blue and green that Tom's notes identified as indicating interest or approval. Dangerous strategy, Krav said. Complex timing. Many variables. But if it works, Jack replied, both our peoples get a chance at something neither of our leaders wanted to give us. Survival, Krav said. Jack smiled slightly. More than survival. Victory. On our own terms. The wind picked up around them, swirling dust into small tornadoes that danced across the meeting ground. Human and Vex stood facing each other, 2 supposed enemies finding unexpected common ground on a planet meant to be their grave. We will need detailed plans, Krav finally said. My technical team must meet with yours. Much work in little time. Jack nodded and picked up his weapon slowly, holstering it rather than holding it ready. A gesture of trust. Tom will coordinate with your team. We start immediately. As they prepared to return to their respective bases, Krav made one final statement. Your leaders were wrong to consider you waste material, Captain Jack Miller. Perhaps mine were too. Jack watched the 3 Vex depart, feeling the weight of what they had just started. They had been sent to die in a war. Instead, they might have just taken the first steps toward peace. Either way, nothing would be the same again. The human fleet appeared in the Terminus system exactly when Krav had predicted. 7 massive warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, their weapons systems powering up immediately. From the hidden observation post in Terminus's largest moon, Jack watched through the enhanced telescope they had built using combined human and Vex technology. Flagship identified, Tom said beside him, his eyes fixed on the scanner. The Determined. Admiral Robert Green commanding. Jack nodded grimly. Green is known for following orders to the letter. He won't question command's intentions. They had prepared for this moment over the past 2 weeks. Working day and night alongside Krav and the modernist Vex, they had created an elaborate web of misinformation, false signals, and carefully placed evidence. Like a complex game of chess, they had positioned all the pieces. Now it was time to see if their gamble would work. Transmission ready, Jack asked. Tom nodded, holding up the communication device they had modified. Ready to broadcast on official military channels. They'll think it's coming from scattered survivors of the 87th following original orders. The message they would send was carefully crafted. Reports of massive Vex forces gathered in the asteroid belt surrounding Terminus, damaged but still functioning emergency beacons, and coordinates that would lead Admiral Green's fleet directly into the path of the dominant Vex faction's main armada. "Send it," Jack ordered. Tom activated the device. A series of coded military signals streamed toward the human fleet. They watched the ships in silence, waiting for a response. Multiple course changes detected. Anna reported from her station at the scanner. "They're taking the bait, moving toward the asteroid belt." Jack allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. Now for the more dangerous part. "Signal Krav," he said to Mark. "Tell them to activate the dominant faction lures." While Tom's team had been handling the human fleet deception, Krav's technical specialists had created something equally impressive. A series of disguised transmitters planted throughout the asteroid belt that mimicked human military scanning signals. To the dominant Vex faction, currently gathering for their planned attack on the Modernists, it would appear that human forces were attempting a sneak assault. "Confirmed," Mark said after a moment. "Modernists report all lures active. Dominant faction ships are already responding." Jack watched through the telescope as tiny points of light began moving from the far side of Terminus, the dominant Vex fleet changing course, heading toward what they believed was a human sneak attack. In reality, they were moving directly toward Admiral Green's forces. "Now we wait," Jack said quietly. The wait wasn't long. Just 20 minutes later, the first flashes of weapons fire appeared in the asteroid belt. The Battle of Twin Betrayals, as they would later call it, had begun. Through their observation equipment, they watched as chaos unfolded. Human ships fired on Vex vessels that suddenly appeared before them. Vex forces responded with their more advanced weapons, causing serious damage to 2 human ships immediately. Neither side understood they had been lured into an encounter, each believing they were responding to the other's aggression. "This is where it gets complicated," Jack told his team. "Prepare the shuttle. We need to be ready to launch the moment there's an opening." The shuttle was their most ambitious creation, a hybrid vessel built from parts of their crashed transport ships and modernist Vex technology. It looked strange, a patchwork of human angular design and flowing Vex architecture. But it was fast and had one critical feature, a communication system powerful enough to reach both fleets simultaneously. They watched for another hour as the battle intensified. The human fleet had regrouped after the initial surprise and formed a defensive pattern. The dominant Vex forces had surrounded them, but were taking significant losses from the humans' unexpected firepower. "There," Anna said suddenly, pointing to a gap in the fighting. "Path to the human flagship is clear for about 5 minutes if we go now." "Launch," Jack ordered. The hybrid shuttle shot away from the moon base, accelerating faster than any human craft could manage. Tom worked the navigation controls while Mark handled weapons. Anna stood beside Jack, both of them watching the battle grow larger in their view screen. "Remember," Jack told them all, "we only get one chance at this. If Green doesn't listen, or if either side decides to shoot first and ask questions later, we're finished." No one responded. They all knew the stakes. They reached the edge of the battle zone in just under 4 minutes. Explosions lit up space around them as human and Vex ships exchanged fire. Through gaps in the fighting, Jack could see the determined Admiral Green's flagship directing the human defense. "Open a channel," Jack ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies, human and Vex." Tom activated their communication system. "Ready, Captain." Jack took a deep breath. "This is Captain Jack Miller of the 87th Battalion. To Admiral Green and all human forces, hold your fire. You have been manipulated into this conflict. To the dominant Vex forces, we have information critical to your survival. Both sides must cease fire and listen." For several long seconds, there was no response. The battle continued around them, energy weapons and missiles flying between the opposing fleets. Then, unexpectedly, a voice came through their comm system. "This is Admiral Robert Green. Captain Miller was reported killed in action. Identify yourself properly or be treated as an enemy combatant." Jack had prepared for this. Authorization code Miller 774 Gamma Echo. Check your records, Admiral. The 87th wasn't wiped out. We were sent here to die as a measuring stick for Vex capabilities. But we survived, and we've discovered something more important than this battle. There was a long pause. Jack could imagine the Admiral checking the authorization code, conferring with his officers, trying to understand this unexpected development. Finally, Green's voice returned. Your code checks out, Miller, but that doesn't explain your current actions or why I shouldn't have you arrested for interfering in a military operation. Because there's a third player in this system, Jack replied. A faction manipulating both humans and Vex against each other. We have proof transmitted to your science officer's station now. Tom sent the data package they had prepared, combined intelligence from their observations and Krav's research, evidence of the secretive Vex ascendancy faction that had been working behind the scenes, encouraging conflict between humans and the other Vex factions. The ascendancy wants us to destroy each other, Jack continued. They've been feeding false intelligence to both sides for years. This battle is exactly what they wanted. As if to punctuate his words, a new set of ships appeared at the edge of the system, sleeker and more advanced than the dominant Vex vessels. The true enemy revealing itself. Admiral, Jack said urgently, those ships belong to the faction we've identified as the Ascendancy. They're here to clean up whatever's left after we've weakened each other. We need to stop fighting each other right now. There was no immediate response from Green, but Jack could see changes in the human fleet's formation. They were shifting to face the new threat. Similarly, the dominant Vex forces had begun to regroup. Then a new voice joined the channel, the distinctive tones of Krav, translated through their system. Dominant Command. This is Technical Chief Krav of the Modernist faction. The human captain speaks truth. Ascendancy has deceived all. Evidence transmitted to your systems now. They are the true enemy of all Vex kinds. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to change. The human and dominant Vex fleets maintained their positions, still partially engaged with each other, while watching the approaching Ascendancy ships. Then Admiral Green's voice returned. Captain Miller, I don't know how you've survived, or what you've been doing on that planet, but your evidence is compelling. I'm ordering a temporary ceasefire with dominant Vex forces. Get to my ship. We need to talk. Quickly. Jack looked at his team, seeing hope and disbelief mingled on their faces. They had done the impossible, stopped a battle between sworn enemies and revealed the true threat. We're on our way, Admiral, Jack replied. And I'm bringing someone you should meet. As their shuttle changed course toward the Determined, Krav's vessel emerged from hiding to join them. Together, human and Vex, they approached the flagship of the human fleet. The battle of twin betrayals hadn't ended in mutual destruction as planned by the Ascendancy. Instead, it had created the first true alliance between species who had been manipulated into hating each other. The real fight was just beginning. But for the first time, they would face it together. The combined fleet of human and Vex ships approached Terminus with weapons ready. From the bridge of the Determined, Jack watched the dusty orange planet grow larger on the view screen. It looked different from this perspective, less like a prison, and more like a battlefield waiting to happen. Strange days, Admiral Green said, standing beside him. The Admiral was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. A week ago, I was ordered to finish what we thought was a failed mission. Now I'm working with aliens we've been fighting for years. Jack nodded. The Ascendancy has been playing us against each other for a long time. They wanted us to weaken each other while they prepared their real invasion. On the other side of the bridge stood Krav and two other modernist Vex. Their presence on a human warship would have been unthinkable before. Now they were valued allies. Even more surprising was the dominant Vex commander, General Tark, who had reluctantly joined their alliance after seeing the evidence of Ascendancy manipulation. Scans show heavy Ascendancy activity around their main fortress, Tom reported from his station. After proving his technical skills, He had been given temporary access to the flagship's systems. They're bringing in reinforcements through some kind of portal technology. Admiral Green frowned. They know we're coming. Of course they know, Krav said through its translator. They have observed us making peace. This disrupts their long plan. They will fight very hard now. The plan they had developed was dangerous but necessary. While the combined fleet engaged the Ascendancy ships in orbit, ground forces would attack the fortress itself. Jack and the surviving members of the 87th Battalion would lead the assault alongside modernist and dominant Vex forces. Their goal: reach the central command chamber where the Ascendancy controlled its operations. Time to go, Jack said, looking at Anna, Mark, and the other soldiers of the 87th who had joined them on the flagship. Our transport leaves in 10 minutes. As they walked to the shuttle bay, Anna fell in step beside him. We started with 500 soldiers. We're down to 172. Not great odds for saving the galaxy. Jack smiled slightly. Better odds than we had when we crashed on that planet expecting to die. The descent to Terminus was smoother this time, with proper ships and no one shooting at them. As they approached the landing zone, Jack could see the space battle beginning above them. Flashes of light as human and Vex ships engaged the Ascendancy fleet. They landed 3 miles from the Ascendancy fortress, a massive structure built into a mountain that hadn't appeared on any of their previous scans. The combined ground force of humans and Vex moved out immediately, using the rocky terrain for cover. Just like old times, Mark said as they took positions behind a ridge. Except this time, we have proper backup. Jack looked at the mixed force behind them. Humans in their battle armored alongside blue-marked modernist Vex, and the larger, more heavily armed dominant Vex warriors. An impossible alliance forged through desperation and a common enemy. First wave, move up, Jack ordered through the comm system. The attack had to be perfectly coordinated. Any hesitation would give the Ascendancy time to bring more forces through their portals. The battle began with an explosion as modernist Vex technology disabled the fortress's outer defenses. Human and Vex forces surged forward together, covering each other as they advanced toward the massive structure. The Ascendancy defenders responded immediately. They looked like Vex but moved differently, faster, more fluid, almost as if they were partly made of energy rather than solid matter. Their weapons fired beams that could cut through even dominant Vex armor. Push forward, Jack shouted as he saw the attack wavering. We can't give them time to regroup. Lisa Jones, who had set up a field medical station behind the front line, was already treating wounded from both species. The sight of a human medic helping injured Vex soldiers would have been unimaginable weeks ago. The battle intensified as they reached the fortress walls. The Ascendancy defenders fought with desperate intensity, but the combined human Vex force pressed forward. Step by bloody step, they advanced into the structure. Jack, Tom's voice came through the comm. I'm picking up massive energy readings from the central chamber. They're powering something up. We need to move faster. Anna, take your team left, Jack ordered. Mark, right. I'll go center with Krav's forces. We meet at the central chamber. They split up, fighting through the fortress's winding corridors. The interior was unlike anything Jack had seen before. Walls that seemed to shift and change. Technology that looked more grown than built. It was alien even to the Vex allies fighting alongside them. Jack's team encountered heavy resistance as they neared the central chamber. The Ascendancy defenders were making a last stand. We're pinned down, Anna reported over the comm. Can't reach the chamber from this side. Same here, Mark added. Too much firepower. Jack looked at Krav, who was using a modernist scanning device. Any other way in? Krav studied the readings. Small maintenance passage, too narrow for my kind. Human might fit. Jack checked the scanner. The passage was tight but possible. I'll go. Cover me. Before anyone could argue, Jack slipped into the narrow tunnel. It was barely wide enough for his shoulders, forcing him to crawl through darkness toward a faint light ahead. He could hear the battle raging behind him, growing more distant as he moved deeper into the fortress. The passage ended at a small vent overlooking the central chamber. What Jack saw through it made his blood run cold. The chamber was enormous, filled with technology beyond his understanding. At its center stood a glowing column of energy that pulsed with a sickly light. Around it, dozens of containment units held what looked like suspended bodies, some human, some Vex, some of species Jack had never seen before. 3 ascendancy leaders stood at control panels, their forms shifting between solid and energy as they worked. They were preparing something. The energy column was growing brighter, the pulse faster. Jack forced the vent open and dropped into the chamber. The ascendancy leaders turned toward him, their faces, if they could be called faces, showing no surprise. "Human," one said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You are too late. The assimilation has begun." Jack raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the leader gestured. Invisible force lifted Jack off his feet and pulled him toward the center of the room. "Your mind will join our collection," the leader continued, "as will those of all who resist. We do not destroy. We absorb. We improve." As Jack struggled against the force holding him, he understood the true horror of the ascendancy. They weren't just conquerors. They were collectors, harvesting the consciousness of other species to add to their composite intelligence. "Why?" Jack managed to ask as he was pulled closer to the energy column. "Evolution requires the best of all," the leader replied. "Your species has adaptability. Vex have technical knowledge. Others have different qualities. Together in our collective, perfection is possible." Jack felt his consciousness starting to blur as he neared the column. In desperate defiance, he activated the emergency beacon on his suit, a signal to both his team and the fleet above. "You mistake unity for slavery," he gasped. "Real alliance comes from choice, not force." As if in answer to his words, explosions rocked the chamber. Anna and Mark had found another way in, blasting through walls with combined human and Vex explosives. Behind them poured soldiers of both species, weapons firing at the ascendancy leaders. The force holding Jack faltered. He dropped to the floor as chaos erupted around him. Through the haze of battle, he saw Krav enter, carrying a device they had built together. A virus designed to separate the artificial neural connections the ascendancy used to maintain their composite consciousness. "The terminal," Jack shouted, pointing to the main control panel. Krav moved with surprising speed for its bulky form, dodging energy blasts from the ascendancy leaders. It reached the terminal and connected their device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the energy column began to flicker. The ascendancy leaders screamed in voices that contained multitudes. The containment units around the room began to open, releasing their captives. "It's working," Mark said as he helped Jack to his feet. "The virus is breaking their network." The chamber shuddered as the ascendancy's systems began to fail. The fortress itself seemed to be coming apart. "Everyone out," Jack ordered. "The whole place is collapsing." They retreated through the corridors, helping wounded and freed captives as they went. Behind them, the central chamber imploded as the energy column collapsed in on itself. They reached the surface just as the fortress began to sink into the ground, taking with it the remains of the ascendancy's terrible technology. Above them, the space battle was ending. The ascendancy ships, connected to the same network as their leaders, had shut down when the virus activated. Jack stood on a ridge watching the fortress disappear, feeling the weight of everything that had happened since they first landed on this planet. Beside him stood humans and Vex together, former enemies now bonded by a shared victory. "What happens now?" Anna asked, looking up at the ships in orbit. Jack turned to Krav, who was communicating with both Vex factions. "That depends on whether we can maintain this alliance." "Difficult," Krav admitted, "but necessary. Ascendancy may return. Other threats exist. Together, stronger than apart." As the dust settled over what had been the Ascendancy Fortress, Jack thought about the strange journey that had brought them here. They had been sent to die in a war based on lies. Instead, they had found truth and forged peace. Command wanted a strategic victory, Jack said quietly. They got something much more important. What's that? Mark asked. Jack looked at the mixed group of survivors around him. Human and Vex working together to tend wounds, share supplies, and plan for the future. The beginning of something new, he answered. Something worth fighting for.